Terra is the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management, remote access, help desk and ticketing, smart automations, patching, software deployment, scripting, and even...
In the middle of the night, in a huge office somewhere in Ukraine, a lone computer wakes up. After booting, it stays silent for a while. Then a new file pops up on the desktop. Perf-C, an empty, extensionless file. A Windows folder opens, and the file gets moved there. Several seconds later, the computer shuts down. Not a soul was around to notice this small event. The next day, as the employees start their morning routine of coffee and gossip, something weird happens. Computers all over the company suddenly begin rebooting, but instead of the Windows splash screen, they display this, a ransom message, a demand for $300 worth of Bitcoin for every infected machine. The company's executives are dumbfounded. They argue and bicker before reaching a conclusion. The bottom line hangs in the balance. The company just can't afford to stop everything and wait for a fix. They transfer one payment, just to see where that will get them. Several hours pass, nothing changes. All the machines are still encrypted, as the IT...
malware. Perhaps NSA. Or inside job.
Staff tries to understand what's happening. The rest of the employees get a day's leave. And on their way home, they understand that their little company wasn't alone. They became the perfect witness of the countrywide catastrophe that unfolds. Some of them visit a gas station, but can't purchase fuel. Payment systems don't work. Others choose public transport and can't get their tickets. Paying in cash might seem like an option, but all the ATMs in the vicinity are down too. Hospitals can't access their records. Utility companies can't send their bills. The Postal Service can't deliver packages. It's nothing short of a digital apocalypse. In a matter of hours, much of the economy of the entire country grinds to a halt. Nearly every company, institution, and service is down. And then it spills over the borders. International shipping, medicine, fuel companies, anything that had an office in Ukraine. The same red on black plague. Oops, your important files are encrypted all across their networks on thousands upon thousands upon thousands of computers across the world. But not the one. The computer that woke up in the middle of the office a night before the attack. For some reason, it's fine. It continues working as if nothing happened. For years, nobody would suspect how it and several more random computers all across the world were involved in the latest and most devastating cyber attack that ever happened. It's them that held the key to answering the questions about not touching it. A weapon that showed the world what a full-scale cyber war looks like. It happened on June 27, 2017, and the world was never the same. The carefree air of the mid-2010s evaporated and got replaced with a new reality. There was no.
If you're a web designer, here are 4 Wix Studio features you gotta know. So first on the list, Section Grid. I'm talking about a revolutionary tool that lets you create your own intricate layouts and keeps it intuitive at every step. So you can split cells, create gaps between them, drag to resize, and swap them around. All right, this next feature has saved me hours of work. Responsive AI. You set up your design once, and with just one click, it'll analyze the section and automatically adjust the response behaviors.
Rollback. By 2017, devastating cyber attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure were nothing new. 2 years earlier, the country saw the first documented attack on the power grid, leaving nearly 250,000 people without electricity in the middle of a freezing winter. In 2016, the attack repeated, cutting off electricity for the capital, Kiev. Both attacks were different from your typical cybercriminal activity. They were done by people who knew the infrastructure and the inner workings of the Ukrainian electricity grid as well. They exploited some top-tier vulnerabilities and used incredibly powerful software that caused physical damage to the critical infrastructure. Anyone who got a glimpse at the code had no doubts. Those were operations only state-sponsored hacking groups were capable of. On the surface, the culprit seemed obvious. Since 2014, Ukraine was at war with Russia. It all started with a revolution in Kiev, or a coup, as Russia calls it. The Ukrainian presidential administration, notorious for its corruption, was a
Gemini is really good. Firebase Studio is really good. And Notebook LM is the best. Because of those deep divers. Man, those deep dive podcasters. Pretty cool.
It's overthrown by pro-Western citizens and politicians. At the time, the Russian military invaded and seized several regions of Ukraine in a land grab that will only be surpassed by the second invasion in 2022. As ceasefire agreements were being signed and the hot war in eastern Ukraine simmered down, the conflict moved away from the front lines. Sabotage operations, assassinations, every kind of guerrilla activity you can imagine became a daily occurrence. But now, for the first time in history, the warring sides had a new domain at their disposal. People in Ukraine and Russia lived a significant portion of their lives online. The infrastructure of both countries was heavily interconnected too. Both sides were more than eager to leverage that. By that point, Russia had ample experience in conducting offensive cyber operations. In 2007, it attacked Estonia in the world's first attempt to DDoS an entire country into chaos. In 2008, it repeated the same playbook during an invasion of Georgia, assisting its troops with digital shelling. Cybernetic attacks became an unspoken but major part of Russia's military doctrine. Each intelligence agency in the country saw it as a new tool at their disposal, but none of them were as enthusiastic as the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, an agency popularly known as the GRU. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the GRU was a relatively unknown but immensely powerful organization. Its roots go back almost a century, and its reputation was one of unrivaled ruthlessness. But by the early 2010s, almost none of that remained. The directorate was underfunded and understaffed. Many saw it as a failure, an agency completely overshadowed by the better-known, freshly renamed and facelifted FSB. But something weird happened after the outbreak of the First War in eastern Ukraine. The GRU suddenly found a way to reinvent itself. One part of that was a focus on cyber attacks. Ukraine, then the rest of Eastern Europe, then the entire world. The growth was spurred by an influx of new personnel. The GRU began attracting the most talented hackers in Russia, from distinguished university graduates to notorious cyber criminals. These cyber cowboys brought their own approach to the agency's operations. They were not afraid to take initiative, improvise, and even inject some personal flair into their work. Within GRU, there was even a group that kept leaving references to Doom, Frank Herbert's seminal work of science fiction, in each piece of their custom-built malware. These references were found after the attacks on the Ukrainian electricity grid in 2015 and 2016. Capitalizing on their discovery, the researchers were quick to give this hacker group an appropriate name: Sandworm. As the first reports on Sandworm's activities were published, complete with a list of nods to the book, Doom references ceased immediately. The attacks did not. Their attribution became more difficult. But by this point, the Sandworm performed enough attacks to become recognizable. The tools they used, the hours they operated, the barely perceptible calligraphy of their code. But above all, it was the targets. Few threat actors in the world were so focused on breaking specialized software, like industrial control systems. Even fewer were so proficient at it, and no one was as persistent at aligning their targets with political goals at the Russian Federation. The attack that defined Sandworm began on June 27, 2017. On one hand, the choice of this particular date seemed straightforward. It was the eve of a national holiday in Ukraine. Attacking on this day would carry a symbolic message and be more difficult to mitigate due to staff shortages. On the other hand, some researchers suggest there might have been another motive for launching NotPetya on that day, a motive hidden behind the perfc file.
Dog horse. I'm a Doris man who needs some dental work. looks like a horse. Imagine that. I can't even make right.
If a man really hated ads, here's what he would do. Day one, he would install Pi on his computer without spending a dime because it's
Hello everybody and welcome back to Space Dock. Today we look at biomechanical and biological ships, which are a very popular trope for making an alien civilization seem advanced or different. Either they grow their ships rather than build them, or the ships themselves are living beings in their own right, sentience sometimes included. But there's more to this design trope than you may realize, especially on the mechanical end of the scale. We start at the
In this video, I'll be comparing the brand new Google Firebase Studio and Lovable side by side. Google finally released their AI coding platform and everybody's talking about it. Well, in this video, I'm going to put it to the test and see what it could do compared to its competitors. We're going to see which of these platforms allows non-technical people to build the best web applications, all with zero code. All right, let's do it. All right, guys. So I have a side-by-side comparison here. On the left-hand side, I have Firebase Studio by Google. This just released. And on the right-hand side, I have Lovable.dev, which you have seen me cover on this channel. So the question is, which of these platforms can make a better application as a non-technical person? And I'm going to break that down exactly in this video. We're going to build the same app with the same prompt. So let's go ahead and get started. Here is the prompt that I'm going to be giving each of our applications. So let's build an app that allows users to input information to get the best credit card for them based on their specifications. We're going to implement information about real credit cards, and we want this to be an interactive app where they fill out forms and they get specialized recommendations for the cards they should be using based on their preferences, amount of money they make, etc. So this is the prompt we're going to be using. As you can see, I put this on both of these applications. So what we're going to first of all see is inside of Google Firebase Studio, we could start coding our app, but we could choose any of these coding frameworks that we want to add. You know, I am not a coder. I don't know necessarily the difference between Next.js and Angular or Flutter. I don't know the difference. So again, this is going to be a review coming from somebody with a non-technical background to see what you can build. So I'm going to click prototype with AI. I'm not going to touch on this specific there. And with Lovable, we just get the option to do that. So it's now going to begin spinning up our preview for both of these different applications. So it'll be interesting to see which is quicker at getting the initial output here. So it looks like on the left-hand side, Firebase Studio is asking for confirmation on some things, and Lovable already went ahead and started configuring this. So it's giving me these features. So we have data input form, recommendation engine, card recommendation display, and then we have the colors, the layout, all this stuff. So let's just click yes, prototype this app, and then see what this looks like here. So you can see Firebase Studio on the left-hand side is beginning to code all this out. It does look a little clunky. Let me just say that. Like it doesn't work smoothly. Where Lovable, it's just like pleasing to the eye watching it actually do its thing. So this is my first initial impression when comparing these two platforms. All right, so we got our first user interface output from Firebase Studio. This is what we got on the left-hand side. Let's give it a second and wait until Lovable gives us our output, and then let's compare the two. All right, so here's the initial output that each of these gave us. You can see on the left-hand side, we have this very, very basic like form application that Firebase Studio created us. On the right-hand side, Lovable built us out a full landing page that actually looks pretty solid. This is our first initial prompt too, so we need to keep that in mind. But let's just take a look at this. You can see, find your perfect credit card match. It even has like a little user interface element of a credit card here called Credit Card Genius. Our app's called Credit Card Genius, and it's basically telling us how it works. We could get started, and it takes us to this interactive thing here, which let's see if this actually works, which looks like it does work. And on the left-hand side, look at what we have here from Firebase Studio. It does not look good. This is the first initial prompt, and let's go ahead and like see if this works. Let's just do something here. Let's just say our income, $50,000, spending habits. Let's say we like to spend our money on travel. This is very like not great compared to what we're seeing over here. Let's click submit, and okay, this submit button does not work. And let's come over to the right-hand side and try out Lovable. It's asking us what our credit score is. Okay, so let's just say we have a good credit score. Same thing, let's say we make $50,000. How many credit cards do you currently have? So it's factoring in a bit more information and context compared to the app on the left-hand side. Click next, takes us here. Spending habits, let's say we spend money on travel, business, and dining, click next. Okay guys, this actually looks really, really solid. How often do you travel? Travel frequently, click next. And then let's say we want our travel benefits and we want sign up bonuses or something. Get recommendations. Okay, so now we have this profile, shows we have a good credit score with $50,000 annual income, top spending categories, frequency, and we can update our preferences as well. So this is a first off, this looks great. Let's go back to our prompts and let's begin prompting this to make some changes here. So actually one thing I want to mention is both of these have some form of editing capability. So I can come here and I can click on this and it allows me to use Excali draw to like circle certain things. Let's just say like I wanted to change the color of that button, but this looks very clunky. Look, when I go to edit this, it just does not look good at all. Like it's all zoomed in, doesn't look great, but on the right hand side, we don't get the same Excali draw option to like actually use a whiteboard to make changes, but we can edit our app via this edit feature, and we could click on certain parts of the user interface. So if we didn't want this, or we want to change something about it, like say we don't like this text, we could come here and change the text if we would like. So they both have editing capabilities. However, I think the editing capabilities on Lovable is a bit better because Google Firebase Studio just looks very clunky, doesn't work well. All right, so I'm gonna come to this on the left-hand side. I'm gonna come over to Firebase Studio and let's just say, let's make the button functional. I want you to make the button functional so that way when I actually click submit, it actually submits this information. There we go, I'm giving that prompt. Also, what I just used right there is called Aqua Voice. I could just click this command button on my keyboard, speak into my computer, it automatically translates that into text, puts that into the user interface, makes it super easy to actually speak with your computer instead of type, saves me so much time. So there's a little hack for you guys that you guys can add to your AI toolkit. Okay, so it made a quick change here. Let's go ahead and test this out again. Click on submit. It says that it's working. However, I do not see the functionality here. That is not working. Let me maybe open this in a separate browser. Maybe that's why it's not working. Yeah, okay, so this just is not working at all. Let's go back to our Firebase app. This still is not working. I can input certain fields, but when I click submit, nothing happens. So let's make our app functional. Beginning to write this code. It is pretty quick at writing this code. It actually uses Gemini 2.5 to write our code, which I believe Lovable still uses Claude to do so. Claude 3.7's on it, I would assume. Okay, I think maybe this works now. Okay, there we go. So it now spits out a card recommendation here. However, it just does not look good, and I wonder if this is actual real card information. So let's come back to Lovable and let's actually get it to recommend a card for us. This looks great. The user interface is awesome. However, I now want you to actually recommend a card based on my specifications that I give when filling out the form. So after I get this functionality working, what we need to do, we need to test out how seamless it is to actually add user authentication. So what this means, this allows for a user to sign up. So for example, inside of our Lovable app, we have our landing page. I want to now make it so that way in order to access this app right here, you need to actually be a user, as well as we're going to add Stripe payments. So you need to be a paying user of our application to actually use it. So I'm going to test that out for both of these to see how easy it is to implement both user authentication as well as Stripe payments, because we want to be able to charge for our app potentially. That is something with these platforms that we want to be able to do. We want to see which platform is more seamless to be able to do that. So we're going to test that out after we get functionality working properly on both these apps. Okay, so Lovable on the right hand side is actually not giving me a recommendation. So I actually don't know if on the left hand side Firebase Studio is giving me the correct information. I need to actually ask right here and say, is this real information or mock data? The card recommendations you're giving me, is this real information or is this just like fake data? And then I'm going to come over to Lovable and then let's just ask if we need to like add some sort of API, like to access like ChatGPT for example, in order to pull the correct recommendations. I want you to give me actual recommendations. Do we need to add any like AI API key in order for you to pull information? Okay, so it's saying that we don't actually need to add that because inside of this credit card context page, we already have some real credit card data and sophisticated recommendation engines. So it says that it's already built out. For the left-hand side, Google Firebase Studio is saying that this is just fake data. We could call an API to get real recommendations. Okay, let's add some form of like AI API in order to use AI to recommend certain credit cards for us. Okay, so this is what we're seeing on the right-hand side with Lovable. It's actually giving us, it has an amazing looking user interface. This user interface looks pretty terrible, and it doesn't pull real credit card information for whatever reason. So we need to add the Google Gemini API key. So Google Gemini is Google's AI model, just like ChatGPT, but it's Google's version essentially. And what we could do is we could just auto-generate an API key, which is actually pretty cool since this integrates directly with Google's ecosystem. That's the cool thing about Firebase Studio, and the cool potential here is it integrates with all the different applications they have. So something like Google Gemini, it's really easy to just instantly connect our LLM here if we're looking to use AI on the back end of our application, as well as like databases. Firebase is Google's like native database essentially. So if we can hook up a database directly inside of Firebase, then that could be pretty great. However, I don't usually like using Firebase. I like using Lovable in Bolt. I like using Supabase, which it natively integrates. It's just much simpler to use. It's not old and clunky. It's like much more intuitive to use. So that's something we need to keep in mind when we're going to begin building out our database here. So instead our API key is updated. Let's go ahead and try this again, see if this is working properly. Okay, so it did give us a recommendation here, Chase Sapphire Reserve. Interesting. Okay, so that's real data here. But again, the user interface just does not look good at all. So there's something we need to do now. We need to add user authentication so users can sign up, and then we also store our like profile information as well as our credit cards that we want to explore into our account. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to come to Firebase Studio and just say, let's add user authentication to our app. So in order to sign up and use our app, they need to be a user. And then I'm going to give the exact same prompt over to Lovable. Guys, I'm enjoying doing this side-by-side comparison. If you guys want more content like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I cover all things AI for non-techy. So if you're not technical, I'm going to show you any different AI tools and platforms you can use every single day as either a business owner or a just everyday person looking to stay ahead of the curve with AI. And if you guys haven't seen in the past, I've covered plenty of videos talking about Lovable, Bolt, Replit Agent, all these AI coding platforms. So you can build apps with AI, even with zero coding. All right, looks like we are getting an error over on the left-hand side of the Firebase Studio. So let's just try again. However, it looks like Lovable is seamlessly figuring this out. Oh, actually, it looks like we ran into an error here. I spoke slightly too soon. And looks like we ran into another error in Firebase Studio. Click fix. I do not know what the hell is going on here. However, it does not look good. And then let's click try to fix with Lovable. It's kind of good that we ran into errors on both platforms at the same time, just to kind of see how they handle specific errors. Okay, so now it looks like we have an updated user interface. We got credit card compass, cool name. Let's sign up. Curious how this flow is going to work. I was saying I have 2 issues. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. All right, and then on the right-hand side, I'm getting an error here because for whatever reason, it's trying to use Clerk, which helps with the user authentication. However, I've never done this before. Usually Supabase just does it. So I'm gonna come here and just say, can we just use Supabase for user authentication? All right, so now it's giving me the instructions on how to implement Supabase. Click on the green Supabase button in the top right. Let's click that. And you come to Supabase and actually create a project. Okay, so now I have this app created. Let's give it a second while it loads. All right, so in order to integrate our app here, I'm gonna click on credit card app, which is the project I just created. I'm gonna click connect. Okay, great, that should be working. I'm gonna go back to project now. And then it says our app is now connected to Supabase. So we can add user accounts and login, store and use real data, use advanced features like edge functions. Getting another error here, so let's troubleshoot this error. Okay, this is because it was trying to use Clerk for authentication, which we're not gonna be using anymore because we're using Supabase, so that makes sense as an error. However, on the left-hand side with Firebase Studio, I have no clue what's going on here, honestly. So to try to sign up, our app is not working. When I click the sign up button, it does not allow me to sign up or anything. Okay, left-hand side, Firebase Studio is nothing but errors. Lovable on the right-hand side, we have an amazing looking landing page. We have a functioning application that looks amazing. So now it's saying that our user authentication should be working now. So let's click get started. Okay, this makes sense. It's asking me to sign up. First name, email, password, let's sign up. Okay, it says that we have successfully signed up. However, let's come to our app here. Looks like the login is not working exactly how we need it, so I need to make a change here. When a new user signs up, I don't want you to send them a link to confirm via email. I just want them to be able to sign up directly to the app. So what this is going to do now is this is going to then change the rules inside of our Supabase account. So it's going to come to SQ SQL editor. What this will do is this will basically write out certain rules in order for our database to follow. So now it should then update this table, hopefully, with like users. Let's give it a second and see if it actually does that. It looks like we need to actually change something manually in here. So, all right, so this is now working. I was actually able to sign into an account or sign up for an account, and it then stores this information here. Again, Supabase is our database. This is where we allow users to sign up, and we could even store kind of information to their account, such as like this profile information here once we actually get the credit card specifications. So let's go ahead. Let's then add something here. Let's say, I want you to now add, I want you to to now save any information to a user profile when they actually get their specific card information. So once they fill out the form and everything, I want you to save this information to their user profile. Okay, we're making progress here with our Lovable app. However, on the left-hand side, Firebase Studio, I have no clue what's going on. It is just not working. Like, click sign up, there's 3 issues here. I mean, I don't know what to do. Firebase API key is missing, so we need to add some Firebase API. Can you help me fix these errors? So the thing is, with Lovable, I'm able to just like ask it to help me fix the errors, and it usually fixes it. I have no clue what to do in Firebase Studio as a non-technical person, if I'm being completely honest. And then going back to Lovable on the right-hand side, you can see it's now adding all this information. This is basically in order to set up profile table inside of Supabase, so you can store information user accounts. Click apply. Okay, so this is where we're at with our Lovable app. So we can actually go ahead, we can fill out our specifications, gives us our recommendations here, and then we can save our profile. So what this does is this automatically stores this information in a database inside of Supabase, so we can always have this information whenever we log into our account, because that is what Supabase does. It ties us to our user profile using a database. What I can do now, let's just say once the user fills out the questionnaire, let's just show them the page that you're on now instead of having to fill it out again. I want them to just fill it out once and be done with it, unless they want to go back and change it. Okay, unfortunately, this is what we're looking at. We don't see, like, we have a fully functioning application on the right-hand side, basically. I'm gonna make a couple more changes with Lovable. On the left-hand side, Firebase Studio, I can't get the app to work. Maybe I'm gonna I'm gonna play around with this a bit, see if I can make some changes, but I mean, I can't even get these buttons to work. So, not to mention, when it was working slightly, like, the user interface was absolutely terrible. So, take this into consideration when you're choosing which platform to use. Lovable, non-technical, super easy to use. I built something pretty cool in a matter of like 30 minutes or something, if that. So, let me keep playing around with this. I'm gonna show you the final product here in a second, but this is my initial kind of consensus after using both these platforms literally side by side. All right, here's where we have got with our Lovable app. So what I'm gonna do is, let's go ahead and preview. So this is like what our app looks like. We have our landing page. This looks great. We have our credit card genius. We can click on get started. Actually, I need to come to a incognito browser to try this for the first time. All right, so I'm trying this in a new browser. I'm gonna click here. We have our landing page. Click on get started. We can sign up for an account. Let's just do something random. Rock testing. All right, so we can sign up for an account. What we then do is we can fill out our questionnaire in order to figure this out. So let's just try a different information here than we did previously. So let's say our credit card is poor. We make $25,000 per year. We have 1 credit card. Let's say that we spend most of our stuff on groceries, online shopping, and gas. Next, we hardly ever travel. We want to get cashback rewards. So we're now going to get recommendations. So it gives us the correct credit card because it's not recommending the same one as the other one where I have a good credit score, I like to travel, all that stuff. So this is working. We can click on, or first of all, we could save our profile. So this will save it to our database that we connected. We can click on our details. You can see this, discover it secured. It tells us all the information. This is our required credit score. It could be poor to fair. Here's our interest rate. Here's our intro APR, key benefits, all this stuff. We can compare it with other cards. Or, and one thing I want to mention is I could refresh this, and this information will stay here because I added the ability to save this to our profile inside of
Trade futures on the go with NinjaTrader Mobile. Place trades with simple order management tools. Access over 4.
Welcome to our channel.
So the article, it starts off with this really bold move from the US, a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports.
Yeah.
That's over $500 billion worth of goods we're talking about.
It's a big number.
It's huge. I mean, what's the thinking behind a tariff that big? What's the US trying to achieve here?
Well, the U.S., they're saying it's all about protecting domestic industries.
Okay.
About, reducing that trade deficit we always hear about and putting pressure on China to, change some of their economic policies. But, and this is a big but, we got to remember that these tariffs, they don't just magically fix things.
Sure.
They almost always lead to higher prices. Higher prices for American businesses and consumers who rely on those, those imported goods.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword then.
It is, yeah.
It hurts China, but it also potentially hits American wallets pretty hard too.
Absolutely.
The article makes another interesting point, though, that I found pretty surprising. It says that China's not just reacting to all of this, they've actually been preparing for these escalations for years.
That's right. Like, they knew this was coming, so they've been strategically setting up countermeasures instead of just reacting after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, for the past 5 years at least, China's been kind of anticipating these moves, developing a whole strategy to counter pretty much anything the U.S. throws at them.
Oh, wow. So can you break that down for us a little bit? What kind of strategy are we talking about?
Well, they've got a multi-pronged approach,
Okay.
which includes things like blacklisting U.S. companies.
Right.
And they're strategically imposing export controls on critical materials. And then, of course, you've got your retaliatory tariffs on key U.S. sectors.
Tit for tat.
Exactly. And perhaps the most significant thing is that they're shifting their trade partnerships away from the U.S.
Oh, wow. So they're not just playing defense. They're going on the offensive, too.
They are, yeah.
So let's break down some of these countermeasures.
Right.
What exactly does it mean for a company to be blacklisted by China? What happens to them?
Well, China has this thing called an unreliable entity list.
And any company that ends up on that list basically faces major restrictions on their operations in China.
So it's like being put in a timeout corner.
Yeah, kind of. The article even mentions a specific example, PVH.
PVH, I don't think I recognize that one.
They're the parent company of brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger.
Oh, wow. Those are some pretty big names in the fashion industry.
They are big names.
So if a company like PVH gets put on this list, what does that mean for them? Could it actually disrupt U.S. manufacturing and those big, complicated supply chains we're always hearing about?
Absolutely, yeah. Being on that list makes it incredibly difficult to do business in China.
Right.
Sourcing materials, manufacturing goods, even just selling products there. It's a pretty powerful way for China to put pressure on companies that rely on Chinese markets for manufacturing.
So it's not just about hitting those companies directly, it's also about shaking up their entire supply chain. Speaking of which, the article also mentions something about export controls on materials like gallium and germanium. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly a material scientist here, but I have a feeling those aren't just random elements they picked out of a hat. Why are those specific materials so important? And what happens when China starts restricting their export?
Well, those materials might not be household names exactly, but they are absolutely vital to a lot of key U.S. industries.
Okay.
Like gallium, for example. Gallium is a key component in semiconductor production.
Ah, so we're talking computers, smartphones, all that good stuff.
Right, and don't forget about military tech and electric vehicles. Basically anything that uses advanced electronics needs semiconductors.
Wow.
And by controlling the supply of gallium, China can actually slow down the growth of these industries in the U.S.
So it's a strategic move to sort of choke off their access to these important materials.
You could say that.
It's a power play for sure. We talked about tariffs earlier, and I'm curious, when China puts retaliatory tariffs in place, which U.S. sectors are they mainly targeting?
Well, they're pretty strategic about it. They're going after sectors where the U.S. has traditionally had strong export positions.
Where we're dominant.
Exactly. The article specifically mentions LNG, soybeans, and automobiles.
Oh, wow. Those are some pretty major industries. So China's basically trying to hit us where it hurts the most.
Yeah, they're trying to inflict some real economic pain.
Make us reconsider our approach.
Hopefully.
It's like a game of economic chess, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. But this whole idea of China shifting its trade partnerships away from the U.S., that seems like a much bigger move, a more long-term strategy. What's the thinking behind that?
It's about decoupling, reducing their reliance on the U.S. as both a market and a supplier. China is trying to, they're trying to rewrite the rules of global commerce.
Ambitious.
And they're doing that by forging new alliances.
Interesting.
The article talks about a delegation of 32 major Chinese corporations.
Oh, wow.
They're actively exploring opportunities in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. It's like they're building a whole new economic network, one where the U.S. is no longer the central player.
So they're creating a system where they don't need us anymore. It's fascinating and a little bit scary, to be honest.
It is.
Are there any concrete examples of how this new economic network is actually taking shape? Like, what does it look like in practice?
Well, take energy, for example. China has actually reduced its reliance on U.S. energy imports by a whopping 60%. in just the last 5 years.
Seriously.
Seriously. They're signing major deals with countries like Russia and Kazakhstan to secure alternative sources of energy. And this is a clear sign that they're really serious about this decoupling thing.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. It's not just talk, they're taking action.
Absolutely. Actions speak louder than words, right?
And it's not just traditional trade and resources that are being affected. The article even mentions China launching an antitrust probe into Google's Android ecosystem, which could potentially cost Google billions of dollars in fines.
It's a big deal.
That's a whole other level of escalation. What's the message they're trying to send with a move like that?
I think it signals a pretty clear escalation in the tech war between the two nations.
Okay.
And it shows that China is willing to use its regulatory power, to retaliate against U.S. actions and maybe even reshape the global tech landscape.
So it's not just about trade anymore. It's about technology. It's about global influence. It's about who gets to control the future. We've talked about the intended consequences of these tariffs and countermeasures, but what about the unintended ones? The article mentions how tariffs on things like lithium-ion batteries and solar panels could actually end up hurting U.S. clean energy industries, which seems counterproductive.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox of trade wars. You try to protect domestic industries, but sometimes the actions you take end up harming them in the long run. Higher prices for essential components for clean energy technologies, it could actually slow down their adoption in the U.S.
So it's a delicate balancing act. And in the midst of all this back and forth between governments and corporations, let's not forget about the impact on everyday Americans. The article states that these tariffs could add an extra $1,200 per year to household expenses. That's not chump change.
It's not. And comes at a time when everything else seems to be getting more expensive too. Food, housing, energy, it all adds up.
It's a real concern. And it's not just consumers who are feeling the pinch. Businesses, especially small businesses, are facing shrinking profit margins, potential layoffs. The economic pain is real.
It is. And the broader economic implications are pretty worrying too. Experts are predicting further rises in U.S. inflation and more disruptions to global supply chains. We're already seeing those supply chain issues play out, and it doesn't seem like they're going away anytime soon.
It feels like we're on the edge of something big, a fundamental shift in the whole global economic landscape. The article uses this term decoupling to describe what's happening, this growing separation between the U.S. and Chinese economies. What does that mean for big multinational corporations, especially the ones that rely heavily on either country? Are they going to be forced to choose sides?